Hello and welcome to our third webinar of Malleshwaram Katte Matu, which is brought to you by Malleshwaram Urban Living Lab. So in our series, the beginning series, we have been examining issues related to COVID and how it is affecting us, and with special emphasis on us as residents of Malleshwaram. So for some of you who had attended the first webinar, we had talked about the first topic was awareness on COVID, and we had a panel of doctors and patients who talked from their perspective. And the resources from that webinar are now available on our MAL website. And our hope is that soon enough, this becomes like a single point destination for all the critical information concerning COVID with respect to Malleshwaram. From there, we moved on to the second webinar where we examined issues of safety when we step out of our homes, how we walk out, exercise, shop, eat, and interact outside of our homes. We looked at the protocols that have been given by the BBMP and if businesses are aware of them. We also hope to speak to the cooperator of Ward 45, who had initially agreed to come for the webinar but could not make it finally. And basically to speak to him about the disaster management cell that is mandated by the government for each of the wards in our city. So what we've done is in the last week, so following our second webinar, we've taken the issues that we talked about at that time and tried to look at how to implement it on the ground. So for example, one of the main concerns that came about in the last webinar was the importance of wearing masks and whether people were aware of it or not. And in response to that, we had a mask distribution and awareness campaign last Tuesday. So our observations and the lessons we learned from that activity will be discussed in today's webinar. Similarly, the idea of the disaster management cell, which we were hoping to broach in some detail last time, we talked to the concerned people, and in this webinar we will be discussing this in some detail. And so we'll continue with our earlier topic, which is of COVID and our safety and how it pans out in various aspects of our life. So the point that I would like to emphasize is that the webinar is like a katte. So that's the whole idea of calling it a katte matu, because we as citizens meet here to discuss in the absence of a physical katte. We use this as a way to discuss the issues that concern us, and then be supplemented by going back on the ground. Then we bring back those lessons again and talk about it. So this becomes like a synergistic, like between a discussion and actual ground level actions. And in this, Sensing Local will provide the research and data to back up the issues that we are talking about, and Malleshwaram Social will help to implement those ideas on the ground. And by the coming together of these, we hope to see some real changes happening, and we will be discussing this in quite some detail at the end. Just before I hand over to Ankit, I'd like to say that MAL is a collaboration between Malleshwaram Social, the community group that is working on both strengthening community ties and in improving civic amenities in Malleshwaram, and Sensing Local, an organization that is keenly working on a number of issues related to the environment and public health in Indian cities. And in today's session, Sensing Local is represented by Ankit Bhargav, who's an urban planner, and Malleshwaram Social will be represented by me, Suchitra Deep, and I'm an architect. And with this, I'd like to hand over to Ankit to take the session forward. Ankit, your mic is muted, I think.
Hi, sorry. Thank you so much, Suchitra. We're actually very kicked to present today's webinar because there were so many community folks who've contributed towards its content. And some of them actually weren't able to make it, but the rest that are here will actually, we will reach out to them to present the work that has been compiled for this webinar. What I would like to do is just to run you through the structure of today's webinar, and also that way you'll get a sense of where we are headed. So we have 4 major sessions that we have planned out for today. One is actually a documentation of this campaign that was held by Malleshwaram Social Residents, which is looking at keeping Malleshwaram safe. So really looking at social distancing. So there was a mask distribution campaign that was done, 200 masks were given out. And through that exercise, there were a lot of conversations that were actually held with local businesses, following up with our last webinar where we had discussed actually SOPs for local businesses and how do we maintain safe distancing. And so we actually kind of carried on some of the questions that had been raised, that look, how are people executing it on ground? What are the challenges? Are people even wearing masks? Are people maintaining the distance? Are people putting up notices? All of that. So while the mask distribution campaign was one aspect, the community members also documented a lot of their observations through that process. And I would really request Krishna to actually present some of his findings. We've taken the notes, Krishna, that you've shared with us and put it on 3 different slides based on what you had sent, the positive observations, negative observations, and the next steps from here. And the second, so apart from this, there is also another aspect which I would just like to bring in, that there were Suchitra and some of the other colleagues had also sort of collected a lot of the imageries around darshanis and other restaurants in Malleshwaram, and try to photo document actually what is happening right now. If they are crowded, what the kind of sort of posters they have up, are people maintaining social distance, are there markings on the ground, all of that. So there are a couple of the on-ground documentation that is also part of this. And there's also short, I mean, Suchitra will also mention small interviews that she had with people on ground and what people are saying with regard to keeping up with the SOPs. This is largely session 1, and we will open this up to you all, the larger community, to say what all you all have to add to this, because all of us are going on the streets and observing these challenges, right? And we have to really figure out how to be safe. Otherwise, the community spread, it really poses threats for each one of us. The session B will get into the what disaster management cell. We kind of touched upon it last time a little bit, but this time we'll have Aparna and Ravi, who've been anchoring this ward number 45. They'll be speaking about it, and we have a special guest. We have Jairaj, who will be talking about actually the experience of Ward 77, where they have already set up a disaster management cell. And he'll be speaking about like what did it take to set that up, what are they doing right now in terms of like actions versus mandate. So we have around 13 to 17 different mandate points, and he'll be speaking about what all is getting covered, as well as his own challenges of getting things going on ground. I also just want to mention that there may be another speaker, Suchita, you can correct me, who is Kala, the Kala from Meetu, who may be here talking about the mask redesigning aspect of it. And I leave it to you. I'm not sure if she's joining.
Kala is right there. She just put up her hand to say she's there.
Oh, perfect. Okay, brilliant. So she's part of the session. Yeah, so she's part of actually the solutioning side of all this. And because there was an issue raised by Krishna and the larger community who went on ground about mask redesigning. So she's there with us, who'll be talking about that aspect of it. Session number 3 is looking at actually the disaster relief that is already going on in Malleshwaram. So there are a lot of community folks that are involved in distribution of food, like the mask thing that we already mentioned. There was also all kinds of support that's going on. And at MUL, we really want to start documenting this and representing these voices to say that it's not just good enough for us to constantly be working and putting in monetary efforts, but also where does the larger institutional system need to move? And we need to partner with government to actually make this happen, because COVID is here to stay. So we have Neha here from Roti Express, who will be talking about the food relief that they have been doing. They have some interesting videos as well, which we would like to also share. And we would like to also leave an open question here with regard to understanding who are the vulnerable communities, aside from the ones that Neha is serving, and I'm sure some of you all know as well, who we need to keep into account as we go on month into month and still having COVID to deal with, right? And also, if other people in this larger community are doing relief work, we would really like to put all of these names, organizations, efforts up on the MUL website so that if you need support, we can reach out to a larger community for that. The last, and again, we will open this up for the questions and answers that you may have. And the last session of this will actually end with kind of really putting emphasis on MUL. What is MUL for? What are the aspirations of you all, the community members here? Where do you want to go? And how can MUL help you get there? So we will also talk a little bit about, Sovia will actually talk a little bit about Sensing Local's work as well. And yeah, and then we'll open it up to the public again, to all of you, to see where the discussion has to go. I will now pass it to Krishna. Krishna, if I could please have you talk a little bit about the distribution that you did, and also all these three things that you mentioned: positive contribution, positive observation, negative ones, and also the next steps. Krishna, you may have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you? I am sorry, I just got into some trouble where I'm now logged in from my phone and my laptop. I'm trying to just fix that. Just give me 1 second.
You can just mute your laptop sound if you want, because that's why the echo is coming.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm here. Okay. So let me, so I think I'm supposed to be talking about the mask distribution and what we observed, I guess. Yeah, I missed the last 2 minutes because I was fiddling with my phone and trying to log in from there. So can you all hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Krishna.
Okay. Yeah. So we had received these masks from BNP, and we thought that we will use those masks and also use it as an occasion to go around the market areas and talk to street vendors and shopkeepers, because these are the two groups we felt that were critical, because they meet and interact with so many people in a day. So we, 8 of us had met, and we targeted the area around 8th Cross, 9th Cross on Margosa, and a bit of 8th Cross itself. So we all had slightly different observations. So I'm going to talk about my own, where we didn't go into any of the bigger shops like the showroom kind of things, but we mainly went to very small shops or actual street vendors. So my general observation is that almost everyone understands the idea of wearing a mask and importance and so on, but the actual compliance varies significantly. In fact, most of them are sort of ineffective because they leave the nose uncovered, or they basically are just wearing it below the chin and so on. Of course, I would like to just put out the caveat that you really have to observe them when they're talking to customers, because I think we all find it extremely uncomfortable to wear the mask continuously for hours together. So these people are there for 8 hours or longer in the day. So, and there are lots of these things about not to keep touching the mask and so on. But I think the basic thing is that they should be wearing a mask when they're interacting with customers. So we don't have a lot of eyewitness accounts of that, but we sort of observed a few people when they're interacting with customers, and a lot of them when they're not interacting with customers. So yeah, back to my general observation, they all are familiar with the concept, the idea etc. But it is not being taken seriously because a lot of them have this very old-looking, tired-looking elastic, which basically when they talk to us, they when they say yes, we know we should wear it and so on, then they have to put their hand up and prop up the mask or things like that. Some of them are threadbare; they've been used. So I mean, to put it bluntly, I don't think that the risk to their health and well-being is not really visible, because otherwise I would think that they would spend the 10-20 rupees to get a new mask, right? So and that is my basic point, that awareness is there, but the seriousness of it hasn't really sunk through to a lot of these people. And then there are people who say that, oh, I left my mask in the auto, I forgot, etc., etc. So there is the awareness, but not the seriousness of the problem. Yeah, that's my feedback that we observed. I think, I don't know if anyone else is going to talk, but maybe I can say a couple of words. That some of the bigger shops have some of the signage that without mask you're not allowed, etc. The shops we went to, they're very small, so they don't have signs, etc. But they all say that we don't allow people without mask. We tell them that they should wear mask, and we are always wearing mask, etc. But I don't know. It's hard to say without really observing whether shopkeepers are really feel strongly enough about it to tell customers to go away, because that's really not what happens in Indian shops. That customer is never sent away because of such reasons. So yeah. So it's again the same thing, that they're aware of it. If you ask them, they'll say yes, we don't allow customers, and all customers are coming with masks, etc. So.
I think there were three major steps, I think, which you could also speak about, Krishna, which I had got from inputs from you, Chaitra and Aparna, talking about the mask redesign aspect of it, the usage, the focus on the usage. I mean, if you could even have something to say about the 2 points, and I can take up the last one.
Right. I think most of us have been wearing masks when we go out, etc. So I think a lot of us have experienced issues with it. And like last time I wore the mask for 2 hours, I found that I had to constantly fiddle with it, because somehow the design never seems to be very effective for me. And when I open my mouth and try to talk, etc., then the mask slips off from my nose, and I have to try and lift it up and so on. So that is something that I don't know who sort of owns it, but there should be more work done to make masks comfortable. And this is I'm talking of wearing it for a couple of hours. So if you're expecting street vendors, etc., to wear masks for hours together and without really fiddling with it and so on, it should be much more effective. In fact, we had one shopkeeper who said that he has been just using a very light cloth, probably 2 layers, and he just ties it up like it's the size of a handkerchief, and he says that has worked for him, and he finds it very uncomfortable to use anything else. So I think that is something that we need to focus on. Look at a variety of masks and see which ones offers a balance between protection and comfort. So I think that is an aspect that I mean, there are lots of masks on the market, and I'm just talking of simple cloth masks, not the high-end N95 kind of things, which are obviously not practical for majority of people from the cost point of view.
I think the point that you're raising, even though it seems like a very small point, it's a very, very important point. And this is like the first contact is actually from the mouth and the spit, and just talking to people.
Right.
So actually, I just want to also just mention 2 other points, which I think Suchitra will also get into a little later. But the other 2 points that were raised was that even though this campaign was about mass distribution, we do want to actually look at what is the kind of IEC campaigns that can be done around maintaining actual usage. So actually making sure that people understand that they need to be wearing it for their benefit and everyone else's. And the last part, which before I hand it to actually over to Kala, will be to look at actually hand and hygiene and sanitation seem to be these completely like untalked about issues. Nobody seems to be talking about this, that there are all of these businesses, there is so much public on the road, and yet there are no places to actually maintain hand. There's no hand wash. Toilets are so scarce. So if the businesses don't have toilets within them, they don't have sinks within them. How do we make sure that that happens? And I think so that we can see the images a little later. I did want to actually just go to Kala for a second. Like Kala, hi. We were thinking if we could go to you for a minute or so, just to talk a little bit about mask designing and whether this is actually the new take that is required for us to design masks for the different kind of usages that we have, and not just let's say mouth size or face size. And if you had any comments on that, that would be great.
Hi everyone. Yeah, first and foremost, what I say is you should have reusable cloth masks. I think everyone should stop using those disposable masks. They don't know where to dispose it. It's being disposed here and there, and it's creating a major landfill issue. So one of the awareness that we have to do in Malleshwaram is to tell everyone to use reusable cloth masks. So we started making cloth masks in the month of March, right during the beginning, and we started making them with string, because elastic was not available. So whatever material was available, but we made sure it is always cotton. That's another thing, that it has to be cotton, reusable mask, and the way it should be placed tightly over the nose. And it has to need not go really behind the ear. Many people are having a lot of problem with having it behind the ear, because if you wear it for many hours, it starts hurting the ear. So the surgeons and in the operation theater and all, they have its strings which can be adjusted. So what we found, we have made about 4,000 to 5,000 masks, and there are different types. We have this kind. Where do I show it? Yeah, this kind, which really fits nicely on the nose, but some of the people are making it with a small little stiff wire around the nose so that it can become tight around the nose. The whole idea is that the air should not from outside go anywhere near the nose or mouth. So where does it go from if it is loose? It goes from here is the hollow point. So it should be very tight there. And yeah, there are many different elastics available in the market. We find that this particular elastic, it's soft and it's comfortable, but it goes bad very fast. After about 5 or 6 washes, and it takes the shape of your ear, number one, and it gets a little frayed. So maybe people should have 10 to 12 masks so that they can use and reuse, or they should try mask with strings. This is the other one, which is cup shaped. So this is very popular. People like this also. And of course, there is filter. So there are 2 types of filter available in the market. One is called that N95. I think that is melt blown, it's called. It's always a non-woven fabric. If you touch it, it feels very fragile and you can tear it easily, but you want it to filter. That's what it is. There's another one which is not melt blown. What we are using is another filter we found from a wholesaler. We are putting a layer of that inside and outside. I mean, like there's cotton layer inside, cotton layer outside with a filter in the middle. But to come to the point of suitability, I find that people are becoming very choosy and fussy about what they wear. It's such an important part for you. I find that elderly people, they like single layer, and or younger people, they don't mind double layer, and there are some fussy people who want it with the filter. And one kind doesn't fit all. That is the conclusion I have come to. One kind doesn't fit all. It depends on the size of your face, and so it has to be a little trial and error. You know, you have got to come to the conclusion that I'll have to try a few and find out which suits me best. But under any cost, people should stop using the disposable ones. It's a dime a dozen available in the drugstores. We don't want them to buy it, and it's very cheap. And of course, some people try to wash it also. Even I tried washing the disposable one. You can wash it 2 or 3 times and then reuse it. But I don't think it's very safe. So this is all I can talk about design.
Great to talk to you another time about classification that we need to be watchful for, so that we can advocate for these kinds of things. The businesses have to wear it white covers. What does it mean? So I think I'll move on to Suchitra. Thank you so much, Kala, again. We'll talk a little bit about some of the examples of sort of hand sanitation that we could find. Over to you, Suchitra.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Ankit. We've just brought out a few samples just to show you, because the idea of public hygiene is so completely missing from our cities that if we start with this, at least we can make some headway. Then we show you some visuals quickly to give you a sense of what is the range of solutions which are possible. You can see they are very, very basic, with just like a bucket and a small pipe. Sometimes it's just one of those water dispensers with a tap. We don't even need to go to anything fancy. And going from there, there are also other possibilities. Like the second image you see is with a water tank and the sink, which is attached to the water tank. So there's a continuous source of water supply. Can we move on to the next image? Yeah, again, similar variations of the same thing, using like a Syntex tank, and then connecting it to either a sink, or in the second image, if you see, very simple, just a ring, maybe a bucket can be hung on it. Can you go to the next one, please? Okay, so maybe we go to the previous one, because I just want to. Yeah, so we have some maybe 20 images. So we've just shown you about 3 or 4 of them, but there are any number of solutions which have been arrived at, very, very simple solutions. And I think what we need to do is probably urge the BBMP to try and set these up very simply, cheaply, effectively at various places, so that we can achieve some amount of hand hygiene, which will generally improve will help us in this crisis. And I just wanted to show you one image, which is the next one, which is to show you that the number of toilets that we have in Malleshwaram actually is inadequate, and we have been campaigning along with other people to get public toilets built at various locations. And this one is hopefully almost complete. And this was I took quite a few months ago before the shutdown, and this is on 11th Main, Malleshwaram. So my point being that if there is a pressure, this came about after multiple representations were made by many people on the ward committee, from MSI and from us also, to have public toilets. And citizen pressure does make a huge impact on getting things changed on the ground. So I'll hand over to you, Ankit, at that point. Ankit, you're muted.
I think I need to keep muting because of the ambient noise. But I was just saying that perhaps a device that we haven't seen yet is actually integrating the foot pedal in it, so that nobody is constantly touching the tap. in this
Actually,
in the hand.
There's one image I sent, very simple. It's just got a foot pedal and a wire. Maybe Aishwarya can pull it out later and put it on the website.
So we will be uploading all of these references anyway, because this is something that we need to be actively advocating, given that there are funds available for these things, and it can really aid. I think these are some of the other posters that Malaysia you found, I think, Suchitra, right, around the stores that you all had visited. So some of the stores are doing it well, I think, but a lot of them are still not caring as much. What I would like to do is that I'll just open it up for 2-3 minutes if you all have any observations or comments from your own experience on the streets, and then we can get on to session number 2. So if anyone has, you can unmute and sort of comment.
Comment about what?
We were
I
just
think
talking
Aparna
about,
has already.
yeah.
Aparna has asked that question. The images which Suchitra showed, do they have a foot pedal by which the tap water comes out?
Ravi, so these are some of the images we pulled off the net from, these are examples from Africa and from India also. And there is one which I had seen with a foot pedal. I think it's a very simplistic solution. We have enough engineers in Bangalore to make a solution like that practicable quite easily.
The second question I have is, it's a great idea to put hand wash machines everywhere. But we Indians are notorious in wasting water. We leave the tap open and wash our hands. What could be done with probably 100 ml of water, we'll use half a liter or 1 liter of water. So is there any way we can regulate the water coming out, the amount of water coming out from these? That's something which you have to look at if you're going to install this in Bangalore. At least I know that tap is just kept open and they're washing their hands or whatever they're doing out there. And water is an issue in India, not just in Bangalore. Shortage of water.
Can I pitch in right now?
Yeah.
I feel if you put in that foot pedal, that should take a lot of stress out of the usage of water, because then at least you can operate it. Otherwise, it's rather impractical when you have soap on your hands and to switch off the tap. It doesn't flow that easily. But a foot pedal might resolve that issue.
Yeah, sure. I think what we're looking at is not to go into any great detail because we have many other issues to discuss, but just to show you, this is just a talking point, and what we'll do is that we'll come back to it. I mean, we want your suggestions. You can write in your suggestions to the MUL email, and then we'll start working on it and come back with some kind of system maybe soon enough. Rather than we discussing it now. I think what we wanted was any feedback on the mask issues from the audience. We'll quickly take that before we move on.
Suchitra, Deepak here.
Yeah.
Yeah, Suchitra, regarding these face masks, I remember, I think Government of India had also encourage people using just plain hankies and cloth with rubber bands behind their ears. Now, as one of your panelists said, these rubber bands hurt after a point of time. So maybe having some design changes wherein your regular hanky can be tied to some kind of a system of ribbons or whatever, which can then be tied behind, so that you can regularly change those hankies every time you go out. And also it's far more convenient than having rubber bands. So this is my submission.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So Kala actually has, she said she's been working on many different prototypes, but I think we still need to improve it because this is a very unprecedented situation where we are, using masks for long periods of time. So we really need some design inputs on that too.
The point being,
sorry, please carry on.
Yeah, so the point being that you kind of wash your hankies on a daily basis, it's also cheap in the sense that almost everyone would have one. And also if some design changes that are sustainable for even the common man and the ones who can't afford masks. That's the, that's the submission. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Kala, will you quickly answer that and then we'll move on, or would you like to?
Yeah, actually the market is full of masks and there are a lot of people who are distributing it free also. As I was telling you earlier, one size doesn't fit all. So I think we will be coming up with small and medium and large sizes soon. We should ask all others to also start making that. One more observation we made was that the children were not having any mask at all. So maybe we should make it for teenagers and children also. And many people, about color also, some people prefer light, some people prefer dark, and the elastic is another big problem. You know, I've noticed that if you keep it on for 8 to 10 hours, the tight elastic will start hurting the ears. But do you want comfortable elastic which goes bad very fast, or do you want tight elastic which is more durable? These are all the decisions that each person has to take on his own. So what we should do is educate people about mask and the advantages and disadvantages, and ask the wearer to choose, to make an informed choice and decide what is the best that suits that person.
Yeah, one more thing before we leave the mask issue. Actually, Kala had received a huge bunch of masks from some other agency called Let's Mask India, and we did one small exercise of trying to give them away to people, and Rahul Dravid is their icon. When we tried to distribute them and we actually took them out and we took one each to try and wear it, we found that they were completely non-standard and they didn't follow any design criteria. The one I took out from the packet was so tiny that it just would barely cover from my mouth, nose to the top of the chin. So I know that there are lots of people trying to do good stuff, but then not following any standards, etc. So I think that is something that we should keep.
Yeah,
I mean, if you're going to spend money and give away masks, let's at least make sure that they are practical and they're usable, not just for some, just waste the money of somebody who was given that money, and they wasted it by producing this bad masks.
I think we'll have to now move on. This is a talking point. We can definitely come back to it later, but I think we'll move on to our next section, which is quickly I'll go over the observations and the lessons we came up with pertaining to the eateries around Malleshwaram. One thing I want to say is that we tried to get some restaurant owners on the webinar, and there is a lot of hesitation actually in participating in something like this. So I'm going to only talk from my experience of interacting with some of them. And can we see the next few slides? Yeah, this is of course Tatte Idli on 8th May. Next, please. Yeah, so I'll just quickly talk about this. So as you can see, there is no real social distancing. So from the let's talk about it from the restaurant's point of view. They have a thermal scanner. They have kept hand wash, hand sanitizer. You can see that, and their employees are all wearing masks and gloves. They have recently, when I went there, there was no publicity material, but they have recently put up all the IEC material that they themselves have got ready, and they have put it up. Now, they had also put markings you can see on the floor, which have kind of disappeared. So from their point of view, they are trying to follow quite a few of the protocols. But when I spoke to them, they said they didn't really know all the protocols. And they were also finding other difficulties, you know, like this person, for example, said that he's not using, you know, steel cutlery because he felt that it, you know, hygiene issues are there. So he's actually using disposable areca nut plates and paper cups for his. You can see the image there. And then he said now the problem is I have huge amount of waste piling up. I don't know what to do. How do I dispose of it? So you're trying to solve one problem, but you're creating another problem. So that was one problem that he had. He said he didn't have a clear idea of the SOPs. So there are n number of SOPs which if you go to our MUL website, they are all put out clearly. They are actually not aware of these protocols. People are not cooperating, as you can see. Move on to the next slide. Next couple of slides, maybe. This is Parota Point. I went at a time when there was not much of a crowd, but we know that it crowds up otherwise a little later. Next, please. This is on 8th May near 13th Cross. They've occupied and all these places, of course, they've occupied the pavement. This is 17th Cross. Next, please. This is at Maniac on 18th Cross, a small dine-in restaurant, and they have not been able to even function in the last few months because of COVID, and even after the lockdown has been lifted, they're not able to function because with their small space, they can't look at physical distancing and other things. So I'll just quickly go over some of the protocols, you know, just to give you a sense of what the government is saying. They're saying that you have to be 6 feet away from each other. They are saying that you must stagger the visitors coming in. There has to be one dedicated person to do crowd management from the you know, restaurant. Cleaning and disinfection has to happen regularly. They have to only, if it's a dine-in, they only can have 50% capacity. Everybody has to wear masks. There has to be markings outside. There has to be thermal screening. Disposal of waste has to be looked at very carefully. Physical distancing has to happen inside the kitchen also, and prominent display of IEC materials, that is all the signages. So, you know, a number of things have been told by the government, but how much are they able to actually implement on the ground? This person, many people have talked to me about police corruption, you know, that they have been having to pay off people. We know about it. That's why they're unwilling to talk about it openly. They talk about people not cooperating. Now, if you see the slide on the right, image on the right, you see these are all young, well-educated people, no doubt, and half of them not wearing masks, standing pretty close. You look a little deeper and, you know, you see the kitchen is full of people. So it's impractical, you know, when they give out these SOPs. They're not clear also. So businesses are also failing, like, you know, when you have a small dine-in and you're not able to follow these protocols, what do? You know, you have to stop working. And there is a fear of speaking out also. Even if they have concerns, they have fear of speaking out. They feel that rules are being arbitrarily applied. And there is a lot of confusion. To sum it up, I'd say that the SOPs are kind of impractical. They are not entirely possible. And at the same time, if there is no rule of law in the sense that these are not followed, then we are going to create more and more dangerous situations. So this is the sort of the strange, you know, kind of crossroads that we stand at as far as restaurants are concerned. So over to you, Ankit.
Actually, we've been trying to document some of these situations so that we can actually figure out how to react and react at scale, not just one entity or another. So I think just in the interest of time, I would like to just move on to the second session that we have in our mind. And so this session is largely broken into 3 parts. We have 3 speakers. I want to actually kind of just read through some of the functions of the disaster management cell that is supposed to be constituted for every ward as of 26th of April 2020. And yet what we find is that many people don't know about it or are not fully aware of what they can claim. I will be reading that out. The other thing that I want to do is I'll be inviting Jairaj who's working in Ward 77 to talk about their experiences. And lastly, Ravi, who's a ward committee member, can actually summarize his own conversations with the corporator and where he thinks the ward disaster management cell for Ward 45 can go. What is and his conversations basically. So I'll just start with actually, so what we've done is there are 13 points that were stated as part of the 26th April circular. And I'll read a few of them. I don't want to get into all of them. So there were a couple overarching sort of points that they had written, like cooperation for containment zones. As you know, the definition of containment zones has been changing a lot. Communication and creating awareness for social distancing and maintaining of 1 meter distance. I mean, for almost 40 minutes, we have been talking about this particular issue. That is not a single line issue. It's saying communicating and creating awareness. It's a very serious infrastructure issue. We have to figure out how other people can do it. What is the stuff required to make it happen? It's not just about fining. The fourth part, which is monitoring and prohibition of large public gatherings, which thankfully are not happening, but the streets are still full in many cases. The other 2 points are, I'll skip the other 2 points. I'll actually go to the next slide. Sovia, if you can go to the next one. Yeah. So now the rest, the other 7 to 8 points that are there are more of the actionables. So one, like drawing of 1 meter square boxes at for queues at small businesses and all of that. This was drawn in March in chalk. All of these have pretty much disappeared. So what are we going to do next, right? Are we going to use hot paint to mark them permanently? Are we going to do something else? This is something that we need to really deliberate on, and fast. Second is actually shifting some of the roadside and street vendors into shifting it to the nearest playgrounds. This may or may not be possible. So what happens in terms of vendor, like management of the pavement itself, which often is encroached to some degree by vendors, but they also have a right to life, right to jobs. So how are we going to manage the street first? The third part, which we are still not seeing what disaster management committees take up, is the role of provision of food, water, shelter for migrant workers, labor, construction workers. So if you can just stay with the previous slide, the second slide, yeah. So provision of all of this basic relief to these workers, that is still going on. And in Roti Express, we have Neha and some other folks also talking about this from their perspective. And a couple of the other points are actually working with NGOs to provide fruits, vegetables, groceries, and masks and others for distribution. So there are people going on, but where is the institution meeting the voluntary organizations or community groups? The other points are around waste disposal. I think this is still a gray area, while to some degree it is happening. We still see that, especially for disposal of masks and other things, we don't know actually what to do. The other 2 parts that you can see is critical because we brought it up earlier in the webinar as well. Provision of drinking water and water supply. I mean, to me, the earlier part of the hygiene of the hand and the toilets, this clubs with the same point. So water supply, hand hygiene, and toilets. All of these things need to be thought through together. And lastly is about disinfection. Now, whether it can happen in larger public areas given the community spread is something to think about. The last slide of this is actually the points that we have been able to draw out from the April 29th circular by BBMP Commissioner. So aside from everything else that was mentioned, they also talk about actually 2 points which I would like to highlight besides stating the 4 important ones, is that we need to help the destitute migrant workers and other poor in provision of, he has reinforced the idea of provision of cooked meals, ration, milk, shelter, and also the identification of homeless and shelterless people. So this, I mean, it kind of paves the way for us to say, what should the disaster management committee do, and what should we be actually, how can the community support them in doing so? I would like to pass it on now to actually Jairaj. Jairaj, if I could request you to actually unmute. Actually, this slide is there, but it's kind of just listing all the actors that are supposed to be part of the disaster management cell. There are lots of government officials. I will leave it here for a second or so. But what I would like to do is to invite actually Jairaj to talk about his experiences from Ward 77. Jairaj, are you there?
Yes.
Okay. We can hear you now, I think. Yeah. Sorry, your audio is not coming through.
You have to unmute yourself.
Just a minute, sir.
Jairaj, you have to unmute yourself.
Unmuted.
Cannot hear you.
Hello.
Is it possible? Yeah.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
we can hear you. We can. Yes, please.
We were able to, along with the corporator, Mr. Sri Satyanarayan, who we also belong to Malleshwaram, the other part, the right-hand side of Sampigi Road belongs to Gandhinagar constituency. So this falls under Gandhinagar. So from Malleshwaram first cross up to the 13th cross falls under Ward 77, up to the Vinayaka Circle and coming back to Link Road and joining back at South End Road. So this is our ward boundary. We were able to follow up a notification which was detailed by the Joint Commissioner West on 24th of April, and we initiated along with the corporator, Mr. Sri Satyanarayan, who we also belong to Malleshwaram, the other part, the right-hand side of Sampigi Road belongs to Gandhinagar constituency. So this falls under Gandhinagar. So from Malleshwaram first cross up to the 13th cross falls under Ward 77, up to the Vinayaka Circle and coming back to Link Road and joining back at South End Road. So this is our ward boundary. We were able to follow up a notification which was detailed by the Joint Commissioner West on 24th of April, and we initiated the ward meeting on 2nd of May, which was a Monday. So what happened was we had a leeway and we were able to collate everyone because we had a system. Basically, ward committee was set up and we have been working on ward committees for 16 meetings up to date from December 2018. So the system was in place. So we were able to roll out a disaster management cell for the ward. Currently, we have a secretary who is also a AE of the engineering department, Mr. Gangadhar. And there are many other people who are involved in this. Currently, the health department, the CMOs, the chief medical officer, waste management is taken over, the JHIs and the senior health inspectors. We also have 3 police stations which fall under the boundary of Dattatreya. So we have all the 3 inspectors also in this cell. We also have the BESCOM, the BWSSB water supply, and we have resident welfare associations and the area Sabha representatives also for each street. Because this system was in place, the area Sabha representatives, we have included them for the easy connectivity to the last mile, that is to distribute any ration kits or to get them on board on checking up. So what my point was, our learning is that we need to have a top-down approach. All the corporators have to be, a corporator has to take up an initiative from his perspective and also set up few officers or designate few officers in place. I was just going through a previous report or a small reading which I had. Sri Jayachamrajendra Wadiyar had set up KC General Hospital in KC means Kempu Cheluvamma. She is the second Maharani of the king. In 1948 of November, this was a ward disaster management hospital which was built for eradicating plague, it seems. My grandfather had told me earlier on this part that after Vani Vilas hospital was also a part of the disaster which had hit Bangalore way then. 1940 also was a plague hit time for Malleshwaram. So that was a outcome of a disaster management cell, sir. So this is my overall view. I would want to understand your concerns, or if I could take up any questions, sir.
I think, Jairaj, the question would also be that given that there are so many different functions of the disaster management, sir, what all activities? Hear you, sir. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Hello? Yes, I can hear you.
So, I mean, I think it'll be great for you to, I mean, also tell us a little bit about what all kind of activities you're able to take up in the disaster management cell, given the mandate. So the mandate has around 17 points, including the commissioner's circular. What all kind of stuff have you all been able to do?
Okay, currently we were able to talk to all the residents on social distancing and basically the containment, basically a basic run of how to manage your waste, segregate your waste and put it separately. And there are few cases in our ward right now. Currently we are in week 2. We have cases which have increased. So we have identified them and marked them. So the waste person, the Paura Karmika who goes there, has been designated, say that do not pick up waste from there. There's one more agency which has to come and pick it up on the waste part. Secondly, we have a little sync problem. As of now, it is work in progress because everything is new. All the departments are on COVID right now. So they also don't know how to react to few situations. For example, the engineering department has to sync up with the waste management department, which is still work in progress.
Are you thinking about like actually other activities, like actually going to businesses and seeing whether they're able to maintain the SOPs? Are you doing all of that? Are you anchoring any of the relief around food or mass distribution for the poor and vulnerable people? Are you doing any of them?
Yes,
right
we did. Yeah, there was a mass distribution and ration kit distribution for the LIG group at the Nagapabidi and the Basappa garden, that is at the near towards the pipeline and further up till the link, the first main road. There is a block which is on the right hand side. If you see, there is the board map which you have put on the right hand side. There is a triangle, that block. There are 14 sectors which come under that. So there has been a distribution of ration kits and the COVID relief material there, sir.
Okay, and is this happening on a continuous basis? Like, are you becoming the center point of all relief? Like, basically, are you acting as an epicenter node?
We have to become one. It is work in progress, but not many organizations know about a disaster management. We are a very small ward, basically, and we have we are just 0.65 kilometers. We are not a great impact person, but yes, people know that we have to come to WDMC and then go through it. So there is a link which we have tried to build. So as of now, yes, everything is controlled, I would say.
And what about like SOPs for businesses? Are you also, like, beyond conversations, are you helping them with, let's say, planning or putting up infrastructure for like even this 1 meter square grid part, right? Making it permanent.
Yes.
Because a lot of, for us, it's also about design brings behavior change. So how are we designing public spaces differently so that it brings behavior change in a certain extent?
That one, I think so. We have a meeting the next month, that is the 4th of July. And these things may be taken up, sir. As of now, the small businesses were shut. So they've just opened on the Sampige Road and the street vendors were on board. The junior health inspectors and the senior health inspectors have been working on the ground to mark their stores in front of them and then give them sanitizers and say this is the way to go about as of now, but it has to improve. It is still work in progress. I would know once we have a meeting. We have to get an update meeting on 4th of this month, coming month.
Thank you so much, Jairaj. I would like to pass on to actually Ravi. Ravi, if you could tell us a little bit about also your own conversations around the matter.
My own conversation, I talked to Jaipal, our cooperator, a couple of days back, because thanks to my being in that 65 plus age group, I'm not allowed to enter this areas like Yeshwanthpur and all that, so I've not been able to keep much in touch with him. It's just on the telephone. He's been doing a lot of work, but I don't think that a ward management or a disaster management cell has been set up, because I haven't heard of it. When I talked to him 2 days back, he said that he has been doing a lot of distribution of food grains to migrant workers and to the lower classes, I mean poorer classes, and doing a lot of sanitation work. Yes, I know he's doing a lot of work. The one major problem we have with Ward 45 is Malleshwaram constitutes just about 20% or 25% of their ward. The rest is Yeshwanthpur and Mattikere side. So his concentration is on that side mainly. It's, Malleshwaram, he does come and he has done a lot of work in Malleshwaram, I won't deny that. But let's face it, I mean, his vote bank is Yeshwanthpur, and he's concentrating his efforts out there. But as far as sanitation is going, this is happening regularly. Twice a week, those guys come around spraying all over the place. And social distancing, I don't see it happening at any of the eateries. And it's not going to happen, because you need to have a separate SOPs for eateries and many of these shops, which are basically hole-in-the-wall shops. We do have some good shops which are maintaining some things. But I think it's a two-way traffic. Citizens have to start participating. They have to start obeying the rules. And how are we going to do that? You said outside, Suchitra said outside, what the Brahmins Tattedli, they have marked those squares. I've never seen anybody standing in the square when I've gone there twice. I've been to that side twice in the last 3 months. I've never seen anybody standing in those squares. So how do you educate the public? That's the answer question.
Yeah.
And as far as Ward 45 is concerned, we are going to have a meeting on Aparna and me are going to meet Jaipal on Tuesday, probably Tuesday or Monday or Tuesday, and we'll see what he has to say on this ward disaster management cell and how to take it forward. We will know after that, probably at the next webinar. Aparna and me will be able to talk a little more about it. That's the situation as of now. Right now, we have no clue as to what is going on that front. That's it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ravi. Thank you. Sorry.
Can I just say a couple of things? First, Jairaj, thanks so much, because he has been extremely forthcoming in sharing information all about this WTMC. And I think that has empowered us to go and meet Jairaj from a sense of knowing, because I think that's the first step. And I think this bridging between wards is extremely important, because somebody who's done it can share that process with us, so we're not reinventing the wheel. So thanks a lot, Jairaj. We'll update you after we have our meeting with Jaipal.
Thank you.
I would also like to thank Jairaj, because he's given me a lot of points to take up with Jaipal. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Ask him to call up Satyanarayan, sir.
Yeah. I'll ask him.
Thank you so much. I think we still have another person we could reach out to with regard to what disaster management cells, Meenakshi from Whitefield, and they've been doing stuff. But I really thank you, Jairaj, for everything, and also just reinvigorating that this cell is something that we can claim and we should ask for. I think we mentioned this last time already, that there is 20 lakhs that have been actually associated only with COVID-related work that's present in the World Disaster Management Cell. And only the disaster management cell has the right to spend. They need to approve it and spend it. So it is important that we get this going, so that all of these measures that we as community on the ground feel, this is something to be asked for and actually implemented. So what I would like to do is to actually move on to the next session, because I think we are into an hour now. So what I would like to do is to pass it on to Neha, if they could introduce the team and talk a little bit about what you all have been doing, and also the current challenges that you are facing now because of the community spread. And where do you see this kind of relief effort going forward? Over to you, Neha. Thank you so much for taking time.
Yeah, it's really our pleasure. So I think for us, I just want to speak a little bit about what started this. The starting was really seeing the humanitarian crisis all around, and I think there was personally for me, and I know I can speak for the other two who are on here as well. I think it was deeply distressing and really hard to witness, and there was this wish to do something, but we didn't know what. So what happened is we realized that there's this thing happening in other localities where they're working to mobilize the community to contribute food, dry food packets and certain other things that go into those packets, which can then be handed out to migrant workers who are assembling, registering at Palace Towns, Manpo and other places. So we read about that, and then we reached out to them and sort of initiated a channel. And post which we, we got together. I think we planned some, then we jumped in, and then we learned a lot. So I'm going to ask Revathi to talk about how we mobilized and how we began. So Revathi. You have to unmute. Revathi, unmute. Yeah.
Yeah, so like Neha said, we began this quite spontaneously, just from the desire to do something. And I think what was really heartening for me was for the initial part of the lockdown, just seeing what was going on, I had this desire for many weeks to sort of get involved in some way beyond just donating to various funds that were cropping up. And I just always felt like it's hard as an individual it's intimidating and overwhelming to think about doing something. But when a couple of us who had similar ideas, Neha, me, Sunita, got together, and very organically the word started spreading. It started as a simple WhatsApp message, burst through, and Malleshwaram Social helped us a lot with that, as well as some other groups and channels that we did. And we realized that there is a huge willingness in the community to get involved and participate. So that that initiative was there, and all it really required was for somebody to create a channel, which we did. And that personally for me was very heartening, because this feeling of being an individual and feeling incapacitated by that was really, it dissolved for me, because I realized there are many such individuals like that, and we can come together. And the initiative kind of just grew very organically. Power of communication, technology, word of mouth. We had people, of course, donating food and supplies that we would send out our requisite lists for every day. But people came forward to help us drive the supplies to these these hubs, the relief places, the place where we were doing the distribution. There were people who, towards the end of the drive, even donated their time. They were willing to come and man the collection points, get involved in other ways. So for me, the biggest learning was that it's about creating smaller channels, I think, and I think making this initiative relatable, making it actionable, and keeping it simple really was useful for us. It was very, very easy and for people to make 3 extra rotis in a day, for example, and pack it up and drop it to a location. That is something it's not a lot to ask for. And when we had an average of, Neha, correct me if I'm wrong, but about 30-35 donors on any given day, who would come with anything from 3 packs of rotis to 50, 60, the numbers were really huge. And it amounted to a lot. We saw that our supplies, on day 1, we had 1 car full. On the second day, we had 2 cars full. The third day, it was 3 cars full, and it just grew. So that was really heartening. Neha, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, Ankit, I'm just going to ask you to go back, because this bit we'll talk about later, the numbers and the distribution bits. So yeah, I think that for us was the most heartening experience, and also just really the generosity and love that kind of shined through. I think we walked away from this, and we had to walk away from it, and we'll talk about that a little now. But we walked away from it really with a lot more, with a sense of really hope, and as well as more. I think I want to say more faith in the power of citizen movements. So it really works to initiate communities, and that they can really come together, because the Malleshwaram really came together. And I think what Revati was saying was true, that they were at any given day quite a significant amount of donors. And we also, I just want to make a mention to say that there were also people who mobilized their entire apartments. So that they got many houses involved, and they would collect and they would come and drop off everything. But in the end, it was still an entire apartment. So I think if you look at in that way, the numbers were quite staggering. Yeah. So I mean, I think I want to, Revati, anything you want to say, or?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So I think I want to talk a little bit about the challenges that we faced, because there were a significant amount of challenges that kept cropping up for us. I think one of the biggest challenges was just the level of uncertainty, confusion that we experienced within the system, right? So when we had to get numbers for trains for the next day, because we had to mobilize the previous day for donations to come in, we wouldn't get clear numbers. Sometimes they would say trains are cancelled, then let us know in the end, no, you have about 1,800 coming, and then we would scramble to then again send out the message and get people mobilized. So I think that was one of the biggest challenges we faced, was simply the confusion, the lack of clarity at a systemic level, which really made it hard, because we are citizens who come together, and to work with that level of confusion was challenging for us. And the other big challenge, I think, so if I've worked with mobilization in communities before, this was particularly challenging, because we're in the midst of a healthcare crisis, and which requires us to practice physical distancing. And that poses great challenges, I think, to mobilizing communities, because it's almost like an opposite sort of a thing, where you want communities to come together, but actually in a way there are so many restrictions now about meeting, about generating a sense of community. So I think that was a big challenge. So I think through the whole thing, as the organizers, we had to deal with two things, and we had to really hold a fine balance between, and the two things that we had to negotiate was the risk of exposure versus the wish to mobilize the community and support the migrant workers. So this was a constant thing that we were juggling, I think, and there were so many conversations. Should we call it off tomorrow? Should we hold on to this for a week longer? So it got really difficult for us. And I think I want to say that, to the extent that this thing about exposures, we kept checking locations, like on COVID trackers, to track if there were locations that were mapped as red zones or stuff like that, and we had to actually change collection center periodically. So that was another challenge, because we needed to track clusters online and kind of respond to that. The other challenge I think that I'd like to outline is for us that we started to notice was basically how to increase the reach of the initiative, like how. So instead of having a small community donate again and again and again, how do we spread this to a wider set of people? Though WhatsApp, online, all of that helped. I think that was something that at least towards the end we had begun discussing, but of course we had to stop because the infections grew, like there was a real spike, as well as the challenge that we had with 24th being mandated as the last date, which meant the uncertainty about whether trains would run, the workers would register in palace grounds grew tremendously. So I think between these two spaces or these two challenges, it got very difficult for us to go on. And I think that, you know, that, I mean, there's several things, but like what could have helped, I think, for us would have been really like some kind of greater clarity and coordination within the system. And I know that's a big thing I'm saying, but that is in the end what we struggled with a lot. So I think I'm thinking around how could there be ward level support for citizen movements. So if there is a great need to mobilize the community and citizens are willing, that's clear, because they are willing, they're giving, donating in kind. We had offers for cash, which of course we didn't take, but we had that. They're donating in time, they're donating resources. I think the citizens are ready. So it's really about connecting that or looping that into the system and having response units that can be system driven as well as citizen driven, and how can there be like some kind of synchronicity between the two. And I think overall one of the things, and I think Sunita is going to talk about it, so I won't talk too much about it, but one of the things that we really felt was the lack of reflexivity. That was the biggest challenge for us, and so I'm always left with this question at the end of mobilization: is how do we generate that sense of reflexivity with the system? So basically, I'm talking of reflexive governance, and that's a big question really, and it is a ginormous one. But that is something that I think we really felt. Yeah. So these were the challenges. Yeah, and even stuff like I have to say that if there was at a ward level or through the system, if there was any way, like even if it had been given like protective gear, you know, the frontline volunteers, I think, you know, we could have continued. So these are some things that would help us carry this forward. So Revati and Sunita, if there's anything that I missed or you want to add, please do. Otherwise, I'm going to pass this on to Sunita now.
No, I think we pretty much covered it all. Sunita can take up the next bit.
Yeah, hi. Am I audible? I won't turn on my video because my network is really bad and I won't survive. Basically we collected rotis and buns and bread and jam, pickle sachets, and people sent in drinks, buttermilk, juice, flavored milk, plain milk, and packets of biscuits. And there were donations of water, bottles of water. The issues that we all debated at the distribution level were the same as you have been talking about, the usage of plastic, disposing of this plastic and segregation, all of these, social distancing at the distribution center itself, which is Tripurvasini gate number 2, which was also a mustering center. So people were gathering there in thousands, and they were sometimes staying overnight because their trains would get cancelled. So there was absolutely no social distancing, and like some of the pictures you've seen before, if you can go back, we didn't have any safety protective gear other than masks, not so far back, sorry. So it's, yeah, this next one. The next one, yeah. So we are pretty much standing there without much else other than gloves and masks, which we provided for ourselves. And this distribution ran, at least from Roti Express, it ran for 24 whole days. And when Neha says reflexivity of governance, what I want to add is nobody in the government ever sort of thought about, can we make this easier for these people who are volunteering and doing this work? Can we put some tables? Can we make some lines? Can we, you know, like just very simple stuff, which anyone could have done. You don't need massive training for this or understanding of planning and strategizing and disaster management. It's just looking at what is there in front of you and sort of saying, how can distancing happen here and how can people who are working be safe? And it's not just us who were unsafe. It was the police who were walking around without masks. It was the BBMP workers who were walking around without masks or gloves. It was the migrants also, all the people who had gathered there, not many of them I mean, they all had masks, but they were quite tattered, and we didn't know how far they had traveled to come there. And there was no mask distribution happening at the distribution center. So at Tripurvasini. So it was really kind of tough to see all of it, and it became very dangerous at the end for us to be there. So in the last week of the of this Roti Express project, we actually moved. We didn't go to the distribution at all. We gave it to the Indira canteen workers who were there on behalf of the government doing some distribution of food themselves. So we gave the packets and requested them to handle the distribution there. And we moved after 2 weeks of working at this space where food was collected and everything. We moved our stock to a place in Palace Grounds, which was a unused kind of building, which was donated to us by someone. So all of this has run on donations, on connections that citizens have had with people across the place. The government hasn't really stepped in to say, okay, how can we make this a little bit simpler for everyone? So a general sense of collaboration would have been really good, because I think citizens are waiting to contribute. And as we've seen with Roti Express, and contribute very generously of their time and money and effort. So if the government kind of just said, okay, we have systems in place and we just want your aid, so that we're not creating parallel systems of operation, but actually stepping into something that's already there and we're just helping out. So no one feels the burden of that entire thing, you know, which is what happened with Roti Express also. We were feeding the police, we were feeding the BBMP workers, we were feeding the ASHA workers, we were manning the crowds, and we were doing data entry. Like all of it was being done by Roti Express volunteers. So it was really, the government really leaned heavily on all of us, because there is a sense of, oh, I mean, this is such a large thing and why should we do it? Or, I mean, how can we do it? I mean, there's just a sense of, you know, it's too big. But if the government comes up, then who can do it?
Sorry, can I come at this point, just because we made two very important points. One was about the fact that the government seemed to have dropped the ball on this, and that it was picked up by the citizens. And had there been, you know, a lot of more systems in place, citizens could have actually contributed much in a different manner. And the fact that when you do have something like this, when you make a call out, people do come together to help. So I think these are the two, at least I think, big learnings, and you know, certainly sort of segues into our our goal that the disaster management cell has to be set up very quickly, so that these kind of systems can be put in place, and we can all function in a more systematic manner. So
I just want to add one thing.
Revati and Sunita, we've seen you over the last few weeks, and it's been really inspiring to see you, and it's been a pleasure to sort of work with you. We'll move on from here to our last section.
I think Sunita just wanted to add very quickly one point. So if
sure, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, although I'm saying that there was a mediocre response mild response from the government agencies, I actually want to say that this is unprecedented for everyone. This is really a crisis. This is a humanitarian crisis. This is a disaster. This is a healthcare crisis. This is all of it. And nobody knows what to do with it. So even we were struggling. We were making 100 decisions in an hour every day there. So it's really a tough thing, and I see that, and I saw that on the ground, and I appreciate whatever people have been doing, but it's not enough, and we have to be quicker in our response time, to whatever challenges come to us. That's all I'm saying.
Sure, I think it's a very important point, because that's the big struggle now. A small thing can actually blow up and become a huge thing. So I mean, in the face of this, I think our responses as a community become all the more sort of significant, I suppose. So thank you so much once again from all of us. So the last part we wanted to talk about is to tell you about what MUL is, and what we plan to do, and sort of, we wanted to have this like a larger discussion, because it would have been nice to involve everybody in it. I think at this point, what do you say, Ankit? We will give a quick intro.
Yeah, very quick intro, and I think that is not a new entity. I just want to state that we are simply trying to understand what is the best vehicle and the mechanisms that we need to be putting in place in order to do the things that we always have set out to do. We want to achieve certain things, but we want to improve also on our methods of working. So MUL is just trying to be that kind of entity. It is the next evolution, but we are very much, it's the same group of people that we are anchored in. So also, because we just want to end this also in 2-3 minutes, there is a volunteer tab on the MUL website. And what we are hoping to do is not to create new kinds of arenas of stuff, but actually become an aggregator and an anchor of the community work that's going on, to find their voices on a common platform. So this is what it is. There's actually a tab, and if you all want to, if there are already people doing a lot of work, but there are new people who are wanting to understand how to engage, please write to us, and we want to include you also in the webinars, but also in the work that's going on. What I will just do in the next 2 minutes is to just run through. Suchitra, do you want to just run through the introduction of MUL a little bit, and then?
We'll go into this into greater detail, because I think we do need to have a kind of a larger discussion about this. But the main idea of MUL was that we are bringing together two strengths, I would say. The strength of Sensing Local, which is doing a lot of work on various issues which are concerning urban areas, and doing it with a solid research-based and a data, backed approach. And Malleshwaram Social has been, on the ground, has been trying to work with the community and with, trying to push things as a community for civic amenities. But when we do find a lot of shortcomings in the way we approach things, and I guess from Sensing Local side, they have a lot of learnings, but they don't have the the people on the ground to sort of roll this out. So this kind of collaboration kind of brings it all together, and it works with the same issues that the ward is supposed to work with, whether it's water, waste, public space management, mobility, urban poor, disaster management, heritage conservation. So all the issues which are already in the wards, is supposed to be working on. What are the focus areas of the ward? Ankit?
I think
I'll just.
I think so. We're ending it, I suppose. What we're going to do is, all the presentations are up on our MUL website. Please go through them if you want to get to know. We've put a few slides about Sensing Local also there. If you want to get to know a little bit more about us, you can visit our website, www.sensinglocal.in, and you can see a few of the slides. I do want to leave you with the MUL website. We will be formalizing the name, but at this moment it's hosted on the Sensing Local platform. So that's why it's sensinglocal.biggsite.com/MUL. And please write to us about what we can do collaboratively better. It is a platform of the residents, by the residents, and this is not something new. This is just taking the work that we are doing and trying to make sure we are more effective as we go forward, because these are new times. There's an email ID, contactus.mul@gmail. That will be our official email. You can write to us on that, and you could reach out to Suchitra at any point of time. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I know that it always extends, but that's the nature of community chachas. They always extend. So I wish we had tea to offer, but we'll leave you here and to meet the next time, I think, in the next webinar. Suchitra, anything else?
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody who participated and gave in their inputs. So we might be back in a week or maybe 2 weeks. Not sure at this point, but basically because we want to get some of these things in order. The main thing that I would say with MUL is two things. One is that these webinars, what we talk about, we try to implement on the ground, and then we come back with lessons and again talk about this. So that it becomes an iterative process between thinking, ideation, and actually working. And the other thing is that the greater the citizen participation in all of these things, the greater the our hopes of succeeding. So we do need your active participation, your responses, your questions, your ideas. So do go on the website and keep in touch with us. We will be mailing you in any case to tell you whether we are back next week or week after next, but we will be back. And thank you so much everyone who has participated in this.